Look at Grandpa trying to teach us about precision. The young officer laughed, watching the 67-year-old range clerk adjust his worn baseball cap. Sir, this isn't Vietnam anymore. We have laser sights, thermal scopes, computer-assisted targeting. The old man just smiled quietly and said, "Sometimes the most advanced technology is right here," pointing to his eyes. What happened next silenced the entire academy. Welcome to our stories. Before we dive into this powerful tale of respect, skill, and hidden legends, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. Frank Mitchell wakes up every morning at 5:30 a.m., 15 minutes before his alarm. Old habits die hard. At 67, he's been the weapons clerk at Colorado Springs Police Academy for 3 years now. He cleans rifles, counts ammunition, replaces target sheets. Nobody asks about his past. He doesn't volunteer it. To everyone else, he's just Pops, the quiet old man who disappears into the background after the young officers finish their training sessions. He wears the same faded Carhartt jacket every day, drives a 2003 Ford pickup that's seen better days, and keeps to himself. But every time Frank's hands touch a weapon, 40 years of muscle memory kicks in. The way his fingers read the weight distribution, the natural shooting stance, the breathing control, none of it ever left. It's just been waiting. His small apartment above the Academy maintenance building is sparse. A single bed, a coffee maker, a small TV. On the nightstand sits one framed photo, 8 men in desert camouflage, all holding rifles, all squinting into harsh sunlight. Frank is in the center, 20 pounds heavier with muscle, 20 years younger, wearing the unmistakable patch of Marine Force Recon. The photo is never mentioned, never explained. It just sits there, a silent witness to a life most people will never understand. Colorado Springs Police Academy trains young officers in modern law enforcement. The instructors are mostly former cops, some ex-military. They teach modern techniques, tactical formations, electronic surveillance, computer-assisted investigations. In the weapons training facility, Sergeant Dave Torres runs the firearms program. He's 38, served 2 tours in Iraq as Army infantry, knows his business. Under him, a dozen young recruits learn to shoot with the latest equipment. "Today we're testing long-range accuracy," Torres announces to his class of 12 rookies. "Each of you will engage targets at 200, 400, and 600 yards using our new Schmidt and Bender scopes with ballistic computers." The recruits are eager. Fresh from the academy classroom, full of confidence in their training and equipment. They've studied ballistics tables, memorized wind calculation formulas, practiced with simulation software. Officer Jake Morrison, 24, former college athlete, steps up first. "This should be easy with these scopes, Sarge. The computer does half the work." Officer Lisa Chen, 26, former Air Force, nods in agreement. "Back in the service, we use similar systems. Point, click, computer calculates everything else." Frank watches from the corner where he's organizing ammunition supplies. He says nothing, just observes. In his mind, he's calculating wind speed by watching grass movement, reading atmospheric pressure from cloud formations, feeling barometric changes in his joints. The young officers take their turns. With the computer-assisted scopes, most hit the 200-yard targets. About half manage the 400-yard shots. At 600 yards, only 2 out of 12 find their mark. "Not bad," Torres says. "These are advanced shots. Takes years to master long-range accuracy." That's when Morrison notices Frank in the corner. "Hey, Pops, you ever do any shooting in your day? Or were you just polishing boots back in Nam?" Light laughter ripples through the group. It's not mean-spirited, just casual dismissal. The kind young people always give to old-timers. Frank looks up from the ammunition crate he's sorting. "A little," he says quietly. "Come on, Pops," Chen joins in. "Let's see what the old school could do. But fair warning, this isn't like the muskets you used to carry." More laughter. Even Torres smiles. It's harmless fun, they think. Frank straightens up slowly. His back has the stiffness of age, but his eyes are sharp. "What's the longest target you've got?" "800 yards, Torres says. "But sir, that's expert level. These recruits have been training for months just to hit 600. "Mind if I take a look?" Frank asks. Torres shrugs. "Sure, why not? But we'll need to set up the ballistic computer, adjust for—" "No computer," Frank says quietly. "Just iron sights." The range goes silent. Iron sights at 800 yards is nearly impossible. Even experienced snipers rarely attempt it. Morrison laughs loudly. "Pops, iron sights? At 800 yards? That's like trying to thread a needle in the dark." "Technology's moved past the Stone Age, sir," Chen adds. "No offense." Frank walks to the weapons rack and selects an older rifle, a Remington 700 with basic iron sights. No scope, no computer, no laser rangefinder. Just steel and wood. He checks the action, feels the trigger pull, examines the bore. His movements are methodical, practiced, automatic. This is a man who's done this thousands of times. "Sir," Torres says, "I have to inform you that 800-yard shots with iron sights are extremely difficult. I don't want you to be embarrassed if—" "I appreciate the concern," Frank says calmly. He walks to the firing line. The 800-yard target is barely visible as a small steel plate. With iron sights, it's just a tiny speck. Frank assumes his shooting position, not the modern tactical stance the recruits learned, but the classic prone position, left elbow planted, right leg cocked, rifle cradled in the natural pocket of his shoulder. The young officers watch with amused interest. This should be entertaining. Frank closes his eyes for a moment. In his mind, he's not at a police academy in Colorado. He's on a ridge in Afghanistan, 2003, watching a Taliban compound through morning heat shimmer. His spotter's voice echoes across 20 years. "Winds 3/4 value, left to right. Target's moving, but he'll stop at that doorway. You've got one shot." He opens his eyes, breathes in slowly, lets half the air out, holds it. His finger finds the trigger with the familiarity of a handshake. The rifle fires. 800 yards away, the steel target rings clear and sharp, dead center. The range falls silent. Not impressed silent. Shocked silent. Morrison's jaw drops. Chen stares through binoculars, unwilling to believe what she's seeing. Torres looks from the target to Frank and back again. "How?" Morrison starts, then stops. Frank stands slowly, his joints protesting. He's not trying to show off. He's just done what comes naturally. "Sometimes," he says quietly, "the most advanced technology is right here." He taps his temple. Then he does something that makes everyone step back. He loads another round. "Winds shifted about 2 degrees, he says, more to himself than anyone else. "Barometric pressure's dropping. Storm coming in about 4 hours. He fires again. Another perfect hit. "Marines," he says simply. "What was your MOS?" Torres asks, using military terminology for job classification. Frank hesitates. Some stories are better left buried. Some classifications better left unmentioned. Scout Sniper, he finally says. The words hit the group like a physical blow. Scout Sniper isn't just a job in the Marines. It's a calling, an art form, the best of the best. Morrison swallows hard. Sir, how many tours? Enough, Frank says. He turns to walk away, but Torres stops him. Sir, wait. Could you, show us some techniques? Real techniques. Frank looks back at the 12 young faces. They're not laughing anymore. They're not dismissive. They're ready to learn. Technology's good, Frank says. Computers help. Scopes make things easier. But what happens when the battery dies? When the scope breaks? When the computer gives you wrong data because somebody programmed it wrong? He picks up another rifle. This is what happens. You learn to use your eyes, your brain, your experience. You learn to read wind in the grass, pressure in the clouds, distance in the way heat shimmer moves. For the next 2 hours, Frank teaches. He shows them how to calculate range using the mil-dot system in their heads, how to read wind speed by watching dust particles, how to adjust for altitude, humidity, temperature changes. He doesn't lecture, he demonstrates. With each shot, he explains his thought process. The recruits take notes frantically, trying to capture 40 years of knowledge in a few pages. The rifle is just a tool, Frank explains as he hits another distant target. The scope is just an aid. But the shooter, that's where the real accuracy comes from. Your mind, your body, your ability to read the environment. Officer Chen raises her hand. Sir, what if we miss? What if all this mental calculation is wrong? Frank looks at her seriously. In combat, you don't get to miss. One shot might be all you get. One shot might save your partner's life, or end it if you miss. The weight of his words settles over the group. This isn't just target practice anymore. This is life and death training from someone who's lived it. As the afternoon wears on, word spreads through the academy. Other instructors come to watch. Academy staff gather at the windows. Even the commandant, Colonel Richards, arrives to see what's causing the commotion. Richards, a former Marine himself, recognizes Frank's technique immediately. After the session ends and the recruits head to debriefing, he approaches Frank privately. Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell, Richards says quietly. Frank's head snaps up. No one's used his rank in 3 years. Sir, I looked up your service record, Richards continues. Or tried to. Most of it's classified. But what I could see... He trails off, then snaps to attention and salutes. Frank doesn't return the salute. He's not in uniform, not on active duty, but he nods with respect. Colonel, why didn't you tell us? Richards asks. Why let them treat you like what I am? Frank interrupts gently. An old man who cleans weapons? You're a decorated Marine. Medal of Honor recipient. 847 confirmed kills across 3 tours. You trained half the snipers currently serving in special operations. Frank looks out at the range where the recruits are still discussing what they learned. They see an old man. They treat me like an old man. Fair enough. I am an old man. But you're also one of the finest marksmen in military history. Was, Frank corrects. Was one of the finest. Now I'm a weapons clerk who keeps the rifles clean and the ammunition counted. Richard studies Frank's face. You're wasted here. No, sir. I'm useful here. Different kind of useful than I used to be, but useful. The next morning, everything changed. A call came in at 6:47 a.m. Active shooter at Jefferson Elementary School, 12 miles outside Colorado Springs. Multiple casualties reported. Suspect armed with high-powered rifle positioned in a classroom with hostages. The Academy's tactical response team was called to assist local SWAT. As the young officers rushed to their vehicles, Torres realized they might need their weapons specialist. "Pops!" he called to Frank, who was unlocking the weapons storage. "We might need extra equipment. Can you—" "I'm coming with you," Frank said quietly. Torres paused. "Sir, this is a tactical situation. Civilians aren't—" "I'm not a civilian," Frank said, his voice carrying an authority Torres had never heard before. "Not today." At the school, chaos reigned. Local police had the building surrounded, but the shooter was positioned in a second-floor classroom with a clear view of all approaches. He'd already fired on responding officers, forcing them to take cover. SWAT Commander Captain Mills briefed the assembled teams. "Suspect is Bradley Hoffman, 34, discharged from Army 3 years ago for psychological issues. He's got a modified AR-15 with scope, plenty of ammunition, and 17 hostages, including children." Mills pointed to a diagram of the school. "Problem is, he's positioned himself perfectly. Every approach puts our people in his line of fire. Our snipers can't get a clear shot, too many windows, too much reflection, and he's staying mobile inside the classroom." Torres raised his hand. "Sir, we have someone who might be able to help." Mills looked at Frank, taking in the worn jacket and baseball cap. "And he is—" "Gunnery Sergeant Frank Mitchell, sir. Marine Force Recon sniper, Medal of Honor recipient." Mills' expression changed immediately. "Sir, what's your assessment?" Frank studied the school building through binoculars. The shooter had chosen his position well. Second floor, multiple windows, good sight lines to all approaches. But Frank saw something the younger officers missed. "He's moving too much," Frank said. "Classic amateur mistake. He thinks movement keeps him safe, but it's actually giving away his position. Every time he moves past that middle window, there's a 2-second window where he's exposed. Our snipers already tried that angle," Mills said. "It's a 400-yard shot with crosswinds, and the exposure time is minimal." Frank looked at Mills steadily. "Permission to take the shot, sir?" Mills hesitated. Frank wasn't official personnel. If something went wrong, the liability issues alone— "Sir," Torres intervened. "Yesterday he made 5 consecutive hits at 800 yards with iron sights, in crosswinds." Another officer arrived with urgent news. "Captain, the shooter just killed another hostage. Says he'll kill one every 15 minutes until we withdraw." Mills made his decision. "Sergeant Mitchell, you're authorized to engage." Frank nodded. "I'll need a rifle, something I can trust." Torres ran to their vehicle and returned with Frank's choice from yesterday, the Remington 700 with iron sights. "Sir," Mills said, "we have sniper rifles with advanced scopes, laser rangefinders. This'll do," Frank said quietly. He moved to a position 380 yards from the school building. Not the closest spot, but the one with the clearest sight line to that middle window. Frank settled into his shooting position, the same prone stance he'd used thousands of times in dozens of countries most people couldn't pronounce. Around him, police officers and SWAT team members watched in tense silence. Through the rifle's iron sights, Frank could just make out movement in the classroom window. The shooter was pacing, agitated, waving his weapon at the hostages. Frank closed his eyes and let his experience take over. Wind speed about 8 miles per hour, left to right. Temperature 72 degrees. Humidity low. Distance 380 yards. Target moving. Exposure time approximately 2 seconds every 45 seconds. He opened his eyes and settled in to wait. 40 seconds passed. Then, as Frank had predicted, a figure moved across the middle window. Too fast, too brief. Another wait. Frank controlled his breathing, slowed his heart rate, became one with the rifle. Movement again. This time, the shooter paused for just a moment, gesturing at something in the classroom. Frank fired. The shot echoed across the schoolyard. Through his sights, Frank saw the classroom window was empty. "Target down," came the radio call from the assault team. "Suspect neutralized. Hostages are safe." Around Frank, the assembled officers erupted in cheers and applause. But Frank just lay there for a moment, his cheek still pressed against the rifle stock, processing what had just happened. He'd ended a man's life. Again. at 67 years old, when he thought those days were behind him forever. Captain Mills approached as Frank stood slowly. "Sergeant Mitchell, on behalf of Colorado Springs Police Department, thank you. You saved 17 lives today." Frank looked toward the school building, where paramedics were evacuating the hostages. Children were crying, parents were arriving, news crews were setting up. "Just did what needed doing," Frank said quietly. But Torres wasn't going to let it go at that. "Sir, that was an impossible shot. 400 yards, crosswinds, moving target, iron sights, in a high-pressure situation with lives on the line." Frank looked at the young officer, the same one who'd been laughing about Grandpa just 24 hours earlier. "Officer Torres," Frank said, "what's the most important thing you learned yesterday?" Torres thought for a moment. "That technology doesn't replace skill?" "Close," Frank said. "The most important thing is that every shot matters. Every single one. Whether it's at a target on a range or in a situation like this. You never know when everything you've learned, everything you've practiced, will be the difference between life and death for someone else." He handed the rifle back to Torres. "Take care of that weapon. Clean it properly. Respect it. And remember, it's not the rifle that makes the shot. It's the person behind it." Word of the school shooting incident spread quickly through law enforcement channels. Within a week, Frank received calls from police departments across Colorado asking for training assistance. The first request came from Denver PD. "Sergeant Mitchell, we'd like you to conduct advanced marksmanship training for our SWAT team." Then Aurora Police called. "Sir, our sniper program could use your expertise." The FBI field office in Denver reached out. "Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell, we have some federal agents who could benefit from your instruction." Frank turned them all down. "I'm not an instructor," he told each caller. "I'm just an old Marine who cleans weapons." But he couldn't stop the young officers at Colorado Springs Academy from seeking him out. During their lunch breaks, he'd find Frank in the weapons storage room and ask questions. "Pops, how do you read wind speed without instruments?" "Sir, what's the best way to estimate range?" "Sergeant Mitchell, what should we do if our scope gets damaged in the field?" Frank found himself teaching informal classes. Not official curriculum, not structured lessons, just sharing knowledge with young people who were genuinely interested in learning. Officer Chen approached him one afternoon while he was cleaning rifles. "Sir, can I ask you something personal?" Frank looked up from the weapon he was working on. "Shoot. Why do you stay here? I mean, you could be making serious money as a private instructor. Special Forces units would pay top dollar for your expertise." Frank set down the rifle and considered the question. "You know why I joined the Marines originally?" Jen shook her head. "Because I was angry. 18 years old, angry at the world, needed direction. The Corps gave me purpose, taught me discipline, made me part of something bigger than myself." He picked up another rifle, checked its action. "But after 30 years, 3 wars, and more deployments than I care to count, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired." "Is that why you retired?" "I retired because young Marines like you deserve instructors who still have fire in their belly, who still believe in the mission. I was just going through the motions." Frank resumed cleaning the rifle. "But here, doing this job, I remember why I loved the Corps in the first place. Not the combat, not the adrenaline. The teaching, passing on what I learned to people who need it." Chen watched him work. "Sir, what you did at the school, that wasn't just going through the motions." Frank paused. "No, it wasn't. Sometimes the old fire comes back when it's needed." 6 months later, Colorado Springs Police Academy officially created a new position, Senior Weapons Instructor. The job description was written specifically for Frank Mitchell. He accepted on one condition. "I don't want a fancy title or a big office. I just want to teach these kids how to shoot straight and stay alive." Frank's classes became legendary throughout law enforcement training circles. Officers would drive from other states to attend his weekend seminars. But he kept his day job, cleaning weapons and organizing ammunition. "Why?" Torres asked him one day. You could make 10 times as much running a private training company. Frank smiled. Officer Torres, how much money is enough? I've got a roof over my head, food in my belly, and useful work to do. What more does an old Marine need? He gestured toward the range where a new class of recruits was practicing. The sides, look at them. 22, 23 years old. Same age I was when I first picked up a rifle in anger. They're going to go out there and face situations where everything I teach them might be the difference between coming home to their families or not. Frank picked up his cleaning rag and went back to work. That's worth more than money, son. That's worth everything. 2 years later, at age 69, Frank Mitchell was still getting up at 5:30 a.m., still cleaning weapons, still teaching young officers that the most advanced technology is between their ears. And when Officer Chen earned her department's marksmanship award using iron sights at 600 yards, she dedicated it to the old Marine who taught us that sometimes Grandpa knows best. Frank watched from the back of the ceremony, smiling quietly. He'd found his purpose again. Not in combat, not in medals or recognition, but in passing on 4 decades of hard-earned knowledge to young people who might need it someday. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with bullets. Sometimes they're fought with patience, respect, and the willingness to learn from those who've walked the path before. Because in the end, we're all just students. Some of us have just been studying a little longer. So I ask you, have you ever met someone like Frank Mitchell? Someone whose quiet competence speaks louder than any boast? Someone who earned respect not by demanding it, but by demonstrating it? Share their story in the comments. Let us know who taught you that experience and wisdom come in many forms. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel. We're here to honor the quiet heroes, the forgotten experts, the people who don't need recognition, but deserve it anyway. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most advanced technology is right here, in the knowledge, experience, and skill of those who came before us. And if you ever meet an old-timer who seems to know more than they're letting on, maybe it's worth listening. You might learn something that could save your life.